Hey crafters, today's project is all about comfy and hopefully cute. I've been wanting to make a peasant skirt for a while. You know those skirts that have a couple different tiers or levels of fabric, and the fabric is all kind of ruffled, and then the skirt has lots of volume, so it's super swirly and comfy. I used to have some of these back in the day. I love them, and I feel like I need more of them in my life again. But I want to up the comfy factor by making this peasant skirt out of flannel. I love me some flannel, especially when the weather's a little chilly, and I hoard flannel year round. So it's time to de-hoard the stash a little bit and hopefully use up some flannel remnants in maybe the perfect way. I do have some small pieces of flannel that are similar fabric weights, and they have some similar colors to them. So I'm thinking, can I use these remnants in kind of a patchworky hodgepodge fashion into this leveled or layered skirt and turn it into something really fun? I don't know. I'm hoping it's gonna work. I hope I have enough fabric. I am working with a pattern that is supposed to be pretty easy. Let's test that out and see if we can make this comfy, cozy, possibly very bright and rainbowy and fun flannel skirt a reality. Let's dive in. You guys might recognize this pattern because I used it for my cozy flannel skirt project recently, where I used this one that's, the skirt is just made out of one type of fabric. But today I want to try this one where we're doing different ruffles in different fabrics, different colors. Could be pretty fun. Now I am going to make a few changes to this pattern because I find some of the things they do in this a little bit more complicated than I want to do today. They call it a learn to sew level 1. I think some of the things they're doing look really cool, but if I was going for super basic, I would change things a little bit. So hopefully I don't make things too complicated. One thing that we noticed in the flannel skirt project, by the way, I will link below to that so you can check that out. We noticed that the back waistband of the skirt, let me see if we can focus a little better. The back waistband looks ruffly. It's gathered, but the front waistband isn't. So what they're having you do, let's bring in our handy dandy pattern here. So what they're having you do is they're putting elastic in the back of the skirt waistband, but not in the front. And that could look really nice because it'll be flat in the front, not bulky, but it'll be stretchy and comfortable in the back. I don't want to deal with that because that's more work and I'm lazy. So I'm not going to do that. Here's the little tweak that I did in the other project. Here are my waistband pieces. This one's the back. It's longer because it's designed to get scrunched up. And this one's the front. Instead of using two different lengths of waistband, I just used this guy and I made two of him. Now this waistband is really big. And I didn't know if I wanted it quite this big because when you scrunch it in, it's going to be a little bulky, So I basically made two of these guys, pinned them together at the side so that I had a big waistband donut. And then I tried that on around my hips and butt to see how big this waistband really needed to be to get over the widest part of me. I ended up taking off, I think, a couple inches off of the width. I can't remember exactly how much I took off for me, but I just tried it on. I played around with it, and I took off a little bit of width if I didn't need it, so that the waistband wouldn't be quite as bulky when it was gathered, but I still needed it to be able to pull on as a skirt. So just play around with it. If you're going to do the same thing I did, maybe, make it big and then try it on and make it a little smaller. Take a little fabric off the sides to shrink it down until it fits. Now, Depending on how much you do that, you might throw off these little diamonds with how they line up with the skirt. I think I didn't even end up using them. I ended up marking the center front on my waistband, and then I marked the center and back center marks on the skirt, and that helped me line up my waistband with the skirt a little better. Those markers help us line up all that gathered fabric a little later. So I marked centers, center front and center back on my pieces. I'll show you that a little later. That's my waistband modification, because I like to complicate things. But what comes next? I mean, oh my gosh, it's basically making donuts of fabric, tiers of fabric, big donuts, run gathering stitches to shrink it in, and then stitch the one tier to the next, make another big donut, a bigger one, gather it. Oh my goodness. Stitch it to the next, to the next, to the next, until you have a whole bunch of ruffles. This is going to be ruffle-tastic, I tell you. Okay, that's kind of our overview. Let's check out the fabric I've got. I hope it's going to work. And let's get started. Well, I have a whole bunch of flannel remnants. Some of these are bigger than others. Like, I think I have like a couple yards of some of them, and others I just have small pieces. So I may not be able to use some of them, or I'll have to use some of them more than others. But yeah, I kind of hoard flannel whenever I find it. And I love how these guys kind of slightly, maybe if you squint a little, go together a little bit. They all have red. They all have some level of kind of vibrantish blue. I'm kind of loving the vibrant blue and the green. Yeah, that's pretty fun. All right, well, I'm gonna go get out my pattern pieces, iron these, see how much I actually have, and see if I have enough to do this. Let's get started. Well, guys, I'm looking at my pattern cutting layout, and I noticed something that seemed a little confusing. Hey, learners, sewers, are you like me and you kind of look at these and you go, ah, and the pattern says it's super easy, but what? Yeah, sometimes it's not just you. Granted, a lot of times it is me, but I don't think today this is. I'm whining a little bit here because I think when you cut out number one is, I think, let's see, from what I can tell, I think the number one piece makes the top tier of the skirt. But then I'm looking up here. They're saying contrast C is the middle tier. Okay, so piece number 7 is the middle tier. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. But then the lower tier is called number 6, pattern piece 6. Why didn't they go in order? I don't know. I'm sure there's a good reason, but that kind of bugs me. Okay, back to the fabric. Well, that took a while. Oh my word, you guys, I'm using like every possible flannel bit that I have here to make this work, and I'm sorry that the flannel looks a little blurry here in my camera screen. It's very dark in my apartment because it is raining today, so I'm sorry for the blurriness, but let's take a peek what we did. Okay, of course this is our waistband piece up here. I've used the largest waistband pattern piece and then cut it in. I think I made each piece a few inches shorter. My recommendation is to cut it out big and then just like pin the sides closed to make a circle and try it on around like your hips and see if you could get that waistband on, and then you can trim it down if it's too big. it's going to get scrunched up with elastic anyway, so I'm okay with it being a little big. I just don't need it too much bigger than the widest part of me. Next here, okay, oh man, I'm using some red and black here. I realized that these two remnants don't actually match. Yeah, didn't know that. One's grayish and one's blackish. Okay, that's cool. Let's keep going. Whoa, next layer. Middle tier. This one is actually 3 pieces. Second tier is 2. Third tier is 3. I had to make these pieces about an inch shorter here in the length because I had just enough fabric to fit in 3 pieces if I shortened them a little bit. So I did. Okay, bottom layer. Yeah, it doesn't match. And I'm actually kind of okay with that. I need 4 panels for this bottom tier. So I've got, 1, 2, 3, and then of course 1 in the back, 4. And I did not have enough of any fabric to do all 4 of those matching. So I'm going to use one that doesn't match, and I think I'm going to put it in the front. As you do. But I actually kind of love it. Like, it is definitely scrappy. But, hey, you know what? I like it. Why not? Let's roll with it, right? Whew. So my next steps, I definitely need to cut out the iron-on interfacing for the waistband and iron that on. And then I need to sew all of these circles together. I need to make each tier of the skirt into a giant circle. So I need to pin the side seams. Let's start with our top tier. Need to line up the edges, pin the 2 pieces together, and then sew on each side. So then I'll have a giant circle for my top tier. And then I gotta pin and sew these 3 panels together to make a slightly more giant circle. And then I need to sew these 4 panels together to make a super giant circle. And then once I've finally done that, I can run some gathering stitches along the tops of each tier. You know, those really big stitches that allow you to like pull on the thread and bunch up the fabric. Yeah, bunching up this much fabric is going to be fun. Woo! That's going to be a lot of sewing. But then I sew them together. And theoretically, that should kind of be it. Oh, and of course, I'll have to put elastic into the waistband. All right, enough talking. Let's pin these pieces together and start sewing. Let's dive in. Okay, I think I'm getting my bearings a little better here. So I think we gotta look at this first. They have you make the lower tier, so the lowest ruffle, they have you make that first. Okay, so you sew all the pieces together. You got a giant donut. Gathering stitches, you're gonna need that to ruffle it in. But then they're having you hem that, which I'm sure it is much easier to hem before it is ruffled and sewn to stuff, but I'm not going to do that because I need to try this on before I hem it, because I don't know if I, need to trim some off the bottom or, anything like that. So I'm not going to do that. I'll have to do that when I'm done, even if it's harder. So that's weird. And then they have you put the middle section together and gather it. Okay? And stitch it to the lower one. That's cool. Okay, so at this point, are we sewing it to the top tier? I think we are. Oh, yeah. According to the directions, they already have the top tier sewn to the waistband. Okay. That's why I was confused. I was like, where's the top tier? There's the top tier. They'd already sewn it to the waistband. Okay. And then they made the lower ruffle. And they made the middle ruffle. And sewed them together. And then they're sewing them to the top tier. Okay. Okay. Sorry. My brain's a little boggled, but I think I got it. Let's keep going. Okay, it is time finally to gather those tiers of the skirt and sew them to the appropriate places. This is the top tier of the skirt and the waistband. You can tell I got the iron-on interfacing in there. I sewed up the side seams, and I also rolled down the seam allowance and pressed it on one side. That's going to end up being the inside of the waistband for us. And once it's all folded in half, we'll have a nice folded down edge because we've already ironed it. Here's a step I constantly forget. I also marked the middle part of the front and the back waistband. I have made this waistband a different size than the original pattern did because I cut it in and made it, well, first I made it bigger than I was supposed to, and then I cut it in. So these cool arrowy things that would normally help me line up this bottom tier to the waistband, they're a little off kilter. So I've now just marked my center points. I have my side seams to help me. That's just going to help me figure out how to gather this big ruffle to this smaller waistband. Speaking of gathering and ruffling, I've also marked my middle point and my back middle point, and of course I've got my side points. And those points will help me gather this big piece of fabric evenly to this skinnier waistband. How are we going to do that? We are going to use these cool big stitches that I did across the top. I did giant stitches all the way across the front, and then I did giant row of two giant rows of stitches, actually, all across the back. I'm using the biggest stitch I've got, and I did it in the seam allowance right along the top, and I did not finish off the edge of my sewing. I just left the edges raw, or the tails of thread. Cool thing about those, if I pull on the bottom one, hey, it is gonna gather my fabric, and that is what I need, because I need to shrink this big piece of fabric and make it smaller so it'll fit my waistband. So I'm going to gather the front and I'll eventually try to make that nice and evenly ruffled and all those good things. Okay, I'll keep going on the front here, but let's switch to the back. I'm going to do the same thing. Alright, let's get over here, pull on that a little bit. Alright, well, I need to keep gathering a little bit more, make that a little bit more even on both the front and the back. But first I gather it, then I gotta pin it to my waistband. Alright, let's get pinning. I want this raw edge of the waistband, not the folded iron down side. I want this edge to be the one that gets sewn to this edge of the skirt. So let's see, I'm thinking this through here, people. Hopefully I get this right. Okay, so let's turn this right sides out. And now I'm going to insert into my skirt. I want the correct side, the right side of the skirt, and the correct side, the right side of the waistband, to touch each other. Then they're correctly lined up. Hooray! Okay, now how am I going to figure out where to pin this? Well, thankfully I've got that center mark of my skirt, and then I have a center mark of my waistband here. Okay, there's my marks. I'm going to pin those. There we go. Okay, Yeah, that'll be a placeholder there for me. Okay, now let me see if I can find the one on the back. Where's the one on the back? Oh, hurrah, there it is. All right, and there's that one. Okay. That's cool. Okay, ooh, now I can use the side seams too to help me. That's good. I think the most time-consuming part of this whole skirt project is the gathering and then the pinning. Gotta gather the skirt ruffles and pin them to each other and get them to line up. People will say, oh yeah, peasant skirt, such an easy project. And, you know, theoretically it is, but I think it takes a lot of time sometimes. I mean, you know, it takes a lot of time to cut out the fabric because there is a lot of fabric. And then ruffling. Lots of ruffling. But it's not going to be too bad. I think I'm going to get this top layer done, and then I might turn on like a YouTube video or some, like some music or something and kind of just get into the ruffling zone as we go. Alright, so I kind of have this evenly spaced around my waistband. Now I'm going to switch to time lapse and keep kind of adjusting. I'll, you know, pull on my threads if I need to gather a little more. I'll loosen it up if I need to. Try to get it as evenly gathered as possible and pin it down. Here we go. Okay, well, that took a while, but I've got the top tier of the skirt pinned to the waistband. Let me kind of turn it right side out just a little bit, just to double check that I'm actually doing this right. I think okay, so on the outside it would look like this, and I will eventually be folding in this other edge of the waistband to be like that. I'll end up hand stitching this down, but that'll be way easy because I've got this already folded under and ironed, so that I can just hand stitch that down. We'll talk more about that later, but hey, this looks good. Let's go back here. Okay, so now I've got to sew all around where my pins are. Try to keep my ruffles as even as possible. And sew that. Cool. Then, then I gotta gather the second tier to the first one. Okay, that's cool. The pattern had some places where you're supposed to mark on the top tier. Where is it? I don't know. There are markings here that help line up with markings here somewhere to show me where that all goes. Okay, so that goes there. And then, oi, oi, oi. Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay, this isn't even gonna all fit on the camera. Then I've got the giant, it's giant, like check this out. Giant bottom ruffle here that I need to gather and sew to the middle tier. And you know what? That is not a terribly hard process, but it is going to take a lot of time. So I'm going to get to sewing and then get to gathering, pinning, and sewing some more. And I will see you guys on the other side. Wish me luck. Yeah, that took a while. it wasn't just the pinning and the gathering, but sewing it all together, yeah, definitely took time. And yeah, each seam had to be sewn twice. Well, they recommended, you know, sewing the ruffle on once, sew in the seam allowance, and then sew again like a quarter of an inch up. So I did that. And then I also kind of zigzag stitched the raw edges. They still look very nasty and frayed, but hopefully it'll keep them from fraying a whole lot more. And yeah, it's a lot of ruffling. Oh yeah, and of course my one mix matched pattern piece on the bottom, I was trying to center it in the back and somehow I didn't. So I'm gonna have to wear this slightly off centered because I'm not sewing that on again. It'll be fine. It's gonna be fine. Hey, now I'm looking at this waistband. Okay. So this is of course the inside of the skirt and we've got this lovely ironed edge. So what I need to do is fold that nicely ironed edge down over the stitching there, over the seam allowance, and I'm gonna fold it down all the way around, pin it, and I'll leave a little gap in the pinning. And then you're gonna do some little stitches all the way around. I'm just gonna stitch it by hand and stitch this down. But I wanna leave a little gap in my stitching because, hey, this lovely tube that we're making is where the elastic's gonna go. And if I leave a little gap in my sewing, then I can put elastic in to the waistband in that little gap. All right, let's get pinning and elasticizing. Okay, we got the elastic in there. I tried the skirt on and experimented with size I wanted for the waistband and then marked that on the elastic, sewed it up, and now that's gonna get theoretically hidden under there. Now, I gotta say, I'm noticing some drawbacks to having the all elastic waistband because I needed to make the waistband big enough, to be comfortable and easy to put on, but the skirt is pretty heavy. It's a lot of flannel, and I'm a little bit worried that if it got caught on something, it could actually get yanked down a little bit because this elastic is really stretchy. So I'm almost thinking, I'm going to play around with this. I think I might put in a little band of twill tape on the inside of the skirt. I'll use my safety pin again and see if I can get it in there, and just have that going around on the inside to add a little bit of rigidity. And then I'll be able to tie a bow right here at the opening, and I could tighten that a little bit while I was wearing it, but I could also like untie the bow and adjust it if I needed to, just to make this waistband a little bit more stable. I'm not sure how well that'll work. I'm just gonna give it a try. Then of course, oh my word, I must hem the greatness, which is the bottom ruffle of the skirt. And yes, I could have done that before I gathered the whole thing and ruffled it, but I wasn't sure what length I needed. So, yeah. I'm gonna work on this. This is gonna take me a while. There's a lot of steps on this skirt have, but that's okay. I'm gonna hem the skirt, and while I do, you guys, it's a great time for you to hit that like button if you found this video amusing, and subscribe for more fun, roughly crazy stuff from Partners in Craft. I will get sewing, you guys, and I'll show you what this looks like when we're done.